Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in this session on cultivating students' identity and sense of purpose through connectedness. For those of you just joining, if it's helpful, you might want to put on speaker view if you're distracted by all the amazing faces, but totally up to you. So my name is Mahnaz Charania. I'm a senior research fellow at the Christensen Institute, and I'm joined by several colleagues in the field today. Andrew Frishman of Big Picture Learning, Yutaka Tamura of NXU, and Nathaniel Cole, who was formerly with America's Promise Alliance and currently with GILT. Now, between the three of them, we'll be hearing about models that prioritize relationship building in service of developing students' identity and sense of purpose. This doesn't just happen in one way or in one place, but certainly yields dividends for student success, both within schools, outside of schools, and as students transition to the workforce. But please don't take our word for it. We are thrilled to have Izzy Fitzgerald, a former Big Picture Learning student, hey Izzy, join us, who will be sharing her story as well as reflections throughout the session. We invite you to add comments and questions in the chat, and we'll try our best to answer those. Again, those joining, you may want to turn on speaker view if you want to just focus on the person at that moment. So at this time, let's launch in. Izzy, I'd love for you to start us off by sharing a bit about yourself and where you are now, after which, Andrew, I'd love for you to share a little bit about the big picture learning model. Izzy, all yours.
Alrighty. Well, hello. I'm Izzy Fitzgerald. I am in San Diego and I'm going to San Diego High School, which is a big picture learning high school. I'm currently a senior, but I like to call myself like a half senior because I got to work with my advisor and my principal to graduate a semester early. So in 2 months, I'll be a graduated high school student, which I'm so excited about. I have a little advisory within my school. My advisor is Schiffer's advisory, so that's what we're under. And that's really who I get to work closely with when it comes to internship coordinating or getting to graduate early and little things like that. And within that, I'll just go back to what school was like before I went to a big picture learning school. I've struggled with dyslexia and mental health issues my whole entire life. And for my elementary and middle school experience, they didn't have a lot of kids who had openly struggled with things like that. And I didn't get diagnosed with dyslexia until maybe third grade. So going into that, they didn't maybe necessarily understand how to necessarily help a kid who had dyslexia at such a young age, and really give me the proper resources. And what they did do was really separate me from the other students for the whole entire day, except for lunch, which meant I didn't get to socialize a lot. And for those being those the most important years to know how to socialize with people, it was a really, really big struggle for me. And when I went to the Met, a big picture learning school, they decided to bring the teacher into the classroom with me that could necessarily help me better than the regular teacher that was there, which was so important to me because I felt seen. And then they asked me, okay, does this work for you, or would you rather still be split up every once in a while? And instead of just assuming what was going to work for me, they really made sure that this was going to actually work for me. And it's the same thing with internships. Most people assume that kids who don't know what they want to do would not go to a school where you have to do internships and eventually take college classes. For me, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I just went to the school because I thought it was fun. The cafeteria looked cool. It was like a lunchroom. That's about it. I went to this anytime someone asks me, oh, why did you choose that school? I was like, the food looked bomb. And I guess the opportunities were cool too. And the opportunities were way cooler than I could ever imagine they could be. They have brought me to so many different types of things and adventures. But I went to that school and I had no idea what I wanted to do. And they were like, oh, well, this kid, she dresses nice every single day to school. Like, you'll never catch her in the same exact outfit. So let's see what kind of fashion oriented internships are in Emblaze, which is a program that shows you a lot of internships within your area. And that's when we found a thrift store. And I ended up working at that thrift store for 3 years after interning there for my freshman year, the first semester. I got to meet the owner. I got to make great connections. I even got to level up into being a manager role until just recently when I had to depart because of other opportunities that Big Picture Learning and the Met had put right in front of my feet. And it was such an amazing experience. And they really let me be so creative, knowing that I had the fashion sense and loved doing fashion. They put me in the manager role of doing all of their window displays anytime I would come in, which for a 13 or 14-year-old is insane to think about. And even now, I'm still the kid to be like, I don't really know what I want to do. I like certain things, but I don't have a strong suit of what I want to do. And for within that, I decided, my advisor from Mr. Schiffer, he had sent me a picture of a flyer that was just hung up around Mesa College, which is where our school is at, because we can take college classes for free. And by the time we finish high school, we could have 2 years of college already done. Textbooks free, classes free, resources free, everything like that. And I had taken a sociology class and I had taken a political science class over the summer, and I had expressed interest in that. So my advisor found a flyer of the mayor of San Diego hiring on interns. So he sent me a picture of the flyer. I was like, you know what? This seems like a long shot. Like this, I don't have any experience in politics. I took one class this summer, which was like an 8-week class. Like, but they might like me. Like, why don't I just email the supervisor? And I did. And we had an interview. It all went well. And I ended up getting the internship. And ever since then, like my life has completely changed. I've gotten to do so many different amazing experiences just because my advisor took note into things that I was interested in and would send me constantly opportunities. I never thought would ever get to meet a mayor. Nonetheless, the first Filipino and openly gay mayor ever, which is insane for me. I also never thought I'd be able to change people's lives in different situations, as I have different issue areas, every intern does. And I chose the fun issue areas of homelessness, public safety, and COVID-19. And those areas, I get to see a lot of pain, but I also get to change people's lives within those pain. And that is so deeply important to me. I've also gotten to go to events, like I went to a Down syndrome awareness event. That was amazing. I was holding a youth climate change rally, and I actually got the mayor to come to that, which was like insane for me to be able to bring such a public figure who really changes San Diegan's life to come to something that I was holding with other teens at my school. And so with that, there's just so many amazing things. And for advisory, it's really just a family atmosphere, and that is so extremely important. And getting to take college classes that young, I'm so lucky to do that, because I would have wasted so much time going to college trying to figure out what major I wanted to be or what classes I wanted to take. I thought I wanted to go to school for business, and I took one sociology class and fell in love with it and knew I wanted to now go to school for sociology, which changes the whole curve of what kind of colleges I want to go to. So it's just, big picture learning is such an amazing thing, and they really support you in any way that they can, and they will meet you where you're at, which is so extremely important, instead of going to a school and trying to meet them where they are, which I feel like is a lot of teens' experiences. The Met and big picture learning schools will meet you where you're at, and I love it, and it's such an amazing thing. So now,
Izzy, if half of all the amazing things that you say are true, I would be so flattered and honored. I want to make sure we get to share this picture of Izzy with Mayor Todd. Gloria, do you want to say a little bit of like what was that event? What were you doing there, and what were you guys talking about?
So it was a San Diego youth climate change event. We do it every year, where all the San Diegos will have a public walkout. San Diego high schools will have a public walkout and meet in downtown where City Hall is, which is where I work at. I never thought I would have worked at a city hall, where I have to dress all fancy. Like that's another part of the story. But
that's the fashion coming all back together, right?
exactly.
I see that. Okay.
Now I walk to the office. Now I was like, oh, I'm never gonna have to wear business attire ever. Now I do. Like that's insane. So, but so this is a San Diego Youth climate change event, and I had texted my supervisor like, hey, do you know that this is happening tomorrow? He's like, what? I was like, yeah, this is happening tomorrow. The mayor should probably come. And then he did. And so next to me is Mayor Todd Gloria, super kind man. He's the nicest person. Like he's the genuinely nicest person you'll ever meet. And actually what we were talking about is how the city hall area looks so much better with all these decorations, because usually without all these decorations and all these really important sayings and things going out, it's pretty dull and kind of scary at times. So we were just having a conversation on how we should decorate better. And I think that's something that kind of is you should put like into mind, is that I was able to have such a like kind of easy conversation with such a public figure, being an intern for him. And it also, having internships like this makes it such a personable experience, especially because the mayor of San Diego remembers every person's name in the office. And to hear that at such a young age and to have that mindset that people important will remember who you are, goes into careers in the future, and knowing that you can do big things like this, which I think is so important for teenagers, especially with insecurities and mental health crises.
Well, let me say, I think it's incredibly important as well. And I hope that that's, I'm thrilled to hear about that experience that you have. And it reminds me of so many of the experiences of many of my students. Maybe I can share a little bit about big picture as well, and sort of how and why I think your story is so important, and in many ways evocative of the experiences of many other young folks. So I'm Andrew Frishman. I'm the co-executive director of Big Picture Learning. And you've already heard the most exciting and important stuff from Izzy. So I'll try not to repeat that. But I'll just say, I'm also not only the co-ED, let's see if folks catch this one. I'm not just the Hair Cub president, I'm also a client. I was an advisor 15 years ago at the Med School in Sacramento, and this is my advisory from that time. So when I hear Izzy telling these stories, I'm thinking about these very young people, some of whom also interned with politicians and went on to intern in the White House and have jobs in public affairs, and others who are running hospitals, and others who are foster care caseworkers, and some who've started their own restaurants and barbershops. And so that's what I come and think about. But I just wanted to say a little bit about where Big Picture sort of emerges from. And it comes from really this very troubling information, which is if you go out and ask most high school students, they will not tell you a story like what Izzy just told you. The overwhelming majority of young people in this country will tell you that they don't get to do things that are very interesting, and they're not having a lot of fun at school, and they don't get to do what they are best at every day. And so our mission at Big Picture Learning is really in response to that. We were founded 25 years ago by Dennis Lickey and Elliot Washer, and our mission is to activate the potential of schools and systems and education through student-driven. That means students in the driver's seat, their voice and choice, really getting to decide what they learn, where they learn it, and how they are then assessed on it. So instead of kids sitting in rows, this is a way that we think about our work. We create advisories. Young people rotate into the center of this. They're supported by their advisors with parents and families, and those mentors, those adults that Izzy mentioned out in the real world, whether it's Mayor Todd Gloria, not everyone can intern with him, but those kinds of connections to mentors are so important. Our overall approach, and I know that the focus of this discussion is like, how do you design a school? These are our core distinguishers for our schools, and they do include those getting out in the real world and internships, individualized learning plans, really authentically assessing the work, organizing and structuring the school around advisories. So these are not necessarily prescriptive. If you go into the 75 big picture schools around the US and a couple of hundred around the world, you won't see everything exactly replicated. Each school has its own local flavor because the school in San Diego is different than the first big picture school in Providence, is different than Oakland, is different than Camden, New Jersey. So each school is slightly different. But really our mission at the end of the day is to activate the potential of Izzy Fitzgerald And each student, just as you heard her identify, a lot of students when they're coming in, from 8th or 9th to 10th grade, their previous experiences in school have not been particularly liberating or liberatory experiences. We really view our work as trying to activate that potential that they already have through getting out into these opportunities. I think I'll also say that, we don't confine ourselves to schools or to classrooms. One way to think about our work is that the school is the community, right? We're trying to activate the entire community. And as we see more and more alumni get out in the world and come back and become mentors, we really see that work. We also really believe you got to take the blinders off, right? Get beyond the myopic focus on some of the conventional standardized achievement assessments and really pay attention to the whole student. Who are they coming in? Where are they coming from? Everything from their personality to their interests to their family and community and culture, really vitally important. We also always take an asset-based approach. We focus on student strengths. We don't think like, well, what are the students' deficits? Like, what are their empty parts? Like, what do we have to fill in for them? No. It's about like, what is the student strong at? What are they already good at? And what do they want to get better at? That's the way we build. We also really encourage leaving to learn. Many schools are operating on the idea of like, we've got to maximize the instructional minutes in the classroom. We actually start almost from the opposite. We believe that a lot of the deepest and most powerful learning experiences happen outside of the school, happen off in situated experiences in those different kinds of internships Izzy discussed. And the role of the school is to help the student to set those up, to process those, to reflect, to figure out what are the additional skills they need to build. And then because every student is doing so many different kinds of things, you have to assess in multiple different ways. Right? It doesn't make sense for Izzy and the other 15, 20 kids in her advisory to take the same standardized test because they're having unique different experiences. So they're creating portfolios, they're demonstrating competencies, they're putting together what we call a credential, a whole host of ways to assess. I also just want to say, like, this isn't some newfangled cockamamie idea. So Benjamin Bloom of like Bloom's taxonomy, if you look at, I think, a seminal text, Developing Talent in Young People, he really identifies that it's about activating students' interests. That doesn't mean confining them in 9th grade. If we had asked Izzy, what is the only thing you're interested in 9th grade? She might have said fashion design. You can start with their interests, but don't leave them there, right? Then Izzy was interested in business ownership and entrepreneurialism. Then she got interested in sociology. Now she's interested in politics, right? I think it's a question of like, how does that arc emerge? We also find that relationships are vitally important. This is something Benjamin Bloom also identified. Those mentors, those adults who are doing the work are so, so key. And so schools have got to take a role of connecting young people out there. And then it's practice. Young people have got to get out. Another student at a big picture school created what I think is just a really powerful image of the way in which those internships can fundamentally transform young people's lives and experiences. And I was talking with Izzy a bit about this sculpture that is off in Philadelphia, not too far from a school near us. And I think, over the course of a 4-year high school experience, I think this just captures a little bit of the visual that I think about. But I'll just say that I think a ton about the students in my advisory. I'm so excited to hear from Izzy because I'm thinking about not only where she is right now. I mean, I don't know if anybody on this call interned with a mayor while they were in high school. I think about the trajectory that she's headed on, but I'll also say like everything that Izzy has accomplished is not an outcome, right? I'm still in touch with all of these students. This is from us from a couple of summers ago. 15 years later, these are students now in their 20s into their 30s, having their own kids, starting their own families. I've been to housewarming parties and baby showers and weddings. Like an outcome is not where you are in 10th grade or 12th grade. An outcome is where you are 15, 20 years into the future. And how did your high school experience impact that? And what I can say is like, I know from some of the stories of these young people where they are today, that the experiences they had in high school definitely set them out on that trajectory. So with that, I'll turn it back over. I get really excited about Izzy getting so excited. And I'm also really, really intrigued to hear how Yutaka and Nathaniel are thinking about this. So I'll toss it back over. Izzy, but let me just see, like, was that a bunch of hooey and ridiculousness I just said, or is that kind of capture it? I get a couple of thumbs up from the future mayor of San Diego. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Andrew and Izzy, for kicking this off in such a powerful way. I mean, both of you have sparked so many questions in my mind, and I invite the audience to also, please, attendees, plug in anything in the chat, or if you even want to take yourself off mute for a minute, would like to open up for a little bit of discussion and reflection. What are folks thinking? What stuck out with you? I'll kick off just mentioning something, Andrew, you stated, and what I heard, I think, and Izzy's experience is that the importance of activating interests, but not confining them to roles that reflect those interests too early, and the dangers of doing that. So maybe we can even like kick off on some reflections or thoughts around that. I'm curious how we make sure we do that. And Izzy, if you felt like that pathway was done rightly for you.
For me, clearly I changed my mind a lot through my high school experience. And instead of my advisor telling me, stick to one, like you got to stick to one, he really was like, okay, let me help you with everything else. And for it's okay to have a lot of different things on your plate and want to eat from every single different plate or every single thing off of that plate. And I feel like that is so extremely important. I'm trying to think of like different examples. I'm like for my friend in my class this year, she I think her first internship was at a like a drama playhouse, and then she changed off and moved into, now she's interning at a dental place. And those things seem so opposite on the different spectrum of life in general. But she was able to slowly maneuver over the years and change interests and find love and passions in different things. And that was fully supported by the advisor. Same thing with college classes. If you start taking a college class and you start feeling like, oh, I have no interest in this, and you withdraw within a certain time period, it is totally okay. And you're not going to go in debt for changing your mind for that class, which is so extremely important for so many students, especially the indecisive ones like me. So changing your mind is like, it's just, I think the way that I can explain it best is that the students lead and the advisors support. And it's kind of like, I feel like a lot of teenagers could have a really good idea and a really broad idea, but don't necessarily know how to execute it. And that's exactly what the advisors and the teachers are for, to help you execute it. And sometimes you're going to change your mind. Instead of the teacher being upset with that, they're like, okay, so how can we shift in a better way? And I think that's the best way I can answer that question. If I answered it, I think I did. You let me know.
Thank you, Izzy. And another thing I picked up from this that I'm just going to reiterate is like, it is as powerful to know what you don't want to pursue through these experiences and that your relationships offer, as it is to know what you do want to spend 5 days a week nurturing your skills and mindsets around. So thank you for that. So Brian has a question. I'll open up to the panelists. How did school leaders get started? How do you start this? And what does it potentially look like in middle school?
Yeah, I'll just mention first in terms of middle school, there are, and most of the big picture learning schools are in the secondary space, but there are a number of K-8 schools and big picture learning middle schools as well. And one of our co-founders also launched a college called College Unbound. So I think the ideas and principles can be adapted across a wide variety of ages. So can take a look. I'd be glad to follow up. I'll put my email in the chat as well if folks want to follow up and learn a little more about that. And I'd also say, in terms of how folks get started, specifically with regard to big picture learning, so we don't own or operate schools. We basically have an idea and a set of design criteria and some distinguishers. We can work in partnership with school leaders and also with their staffs if they're interested in adopting either part or a number of aspects of our approach. But again, it's only if folks are really interested and excited and want to do that. We don't like come in and start forcing it down anybody's throat. It's only if these are appealing ideas.
Great. We'll come back to some of the other questions. Thank you, Andrew. I'd like to invite Yutaka to share some about the NXU model, because I think it's really helpful for us to understand how some models might sit within schools and systems and others might be leveraged in partnership to external organizations. And I think, Yutaka, you have some great lessons learned. So would love to hear from you kind of what you were looking to solve with when you launched, solve for when you launched NXU, and what you focus on in terms of building young people's sense of identity and purpose.
Izzy is excited. Andrew got excited, so how can I not be excited as well? Izzy, thanks so much for starting us off with your compelling journey. I think I told you a week ago that I moved recently to San Diego. I haven't had a chance to meet you, but I hope to get a chance to connect with you at some point in person, along with the mayor potentially. But I'm Yutaka Tamura. I am the executive director of NXU, which is short for Nexus, meaning connection. So I'll come back to Nexus and a connection in a second, but briefly, for the past 4 years or so, we've been anchored around the concept of purpose development, have created a research-based and now validated purpose development methodology. And more specifically, we've created a curriculum that's anchored around purpose development and that connects the dots among 5 often disparate constructs that I think Izzy and Andrew explicitly and implicitly touched on throughout their comments. So those are certainly first and foremost purpose, but also social emotional learning, identity development, relationship and social capital development, and career exploration. And we've been working with students from across the country over the course of the past 4+ years. And over the course of the past couple of years, we've been working very earnestly with educators, schools, and youth organizations to embed our methodology and our curriculum into the fabric of their learning community. So if I think about what Izzy did, she shared sort of her own personal journey. Then we heard from Andrew about sort of a school model, which integrates many of these constructs. I now want to sort of share with you at a practical level, learning experiences, or in the language of schools, lessons, 2 lessons from 111 lesson curriculum that we've built out that explicitly connects the dots among these 5 constructs. So we start to get to see how this might work at an operational day-to-day classroom level. So the first one is called the life timeline. In this learning experience, students, and I think Izzy, you may have done something similar, unrelated to NXU in your own learning journey. So just wanted to point that out. But in this learning journey, in this learning experience, students are asked to identify the formative experiences they've had in their life, including positive experiences and experiences they may identify as challenging, map them onto a chart that looks like just like this, and then to share their experiences with their peers. Through this learning experience, students first and foremost cultivate the social emotional learning skill of self-awareness by deeply considering their life journey. And by identifying the formative experiences they've had, they start to deepen an understanding of their multifaceted identity. They also foster the social emotional learning skill of intentional listening and empathy by sharing and affirming each other's life journeys. And by identifying the formative experiences they've had, students build a foundation upon which to more deeply and clearly consider their forward-looking sense of purpose, and the formative experiences they've had undoubtedly inform or will inform the career decisions that they make. So on this note, coincidentally, this happens to be my own personal life timeline. A few of you may have noticed on screen in the bottom right corner, it says father's death, because my father passed away when I was in 12th grade. Only then did I find out that he had been a CIA agent, which means, by the way, that he was pretty darn good at his job, because I never found out what he did until he passed away. And as a result, we rarely talked about work in a meaningful way at home, which therefore means, not surprisingly, I've had my own issues around my own purpose journey, which therefore means, not surprisingly, I've spent about the past 5 years focused on creating safe, affirming, supportive spaces for young people like Izzy to deeply consider their sense of purpose with the support of educators like us. So here's the next learning experience. In this one, students are introduced to a definition of purpose, which is purpose is the guiding intention, which sits at the intersection of what you're good at, what you enjoy, and what needs in the world activate you. I think, Izzy, I just took a note, but I think the language you used was issue areas that you had to identify through your mayor's office work. So different language, we call them needs in the world. Once they're introduced to this definition, students are paired with each other to interview each other and to support each other to, as comprehensively as possible, articulate their own strengths, joys, and needs in the world. And then they're introduced to a template that looks like this to codify those 3 dimensions and more broadly their sense of purpose into a crystallized, individualized life purpose statement. So in a moment, I'm going to share with you one student's life purpose statement. As awkward as it may be, I'm going to sit in silence for a few minutes, or a few moments, I should say, not few minutes, that would be pretty awkward, to give each of you a few moments to read it, digest it, and hopefully appreciate this life purpose statement. And I appreciate that Izzy's leaning in, reading intently, so thank you. So in this learning experience, students further cultivate their social emotional learning skill of self-awareness by really reflecting deeply on their strengths, their joys, and the needs in the world that activate them. And in doing so, they deepen an understanding of their own multifaceted identities. They further cultivate relationships and even uncover what we think is critical, latent social capital that exists even among peer groups of students who are in the same school. By interviewing each other and sharing their life purpose statements, they literally draft a life purpose statement that undoubtedly crystallizes a clear understanding of their own sense of purpose. And with a life purpose statement, and in particular, a clear understanding of the needs, or in the language of Izzy, the issue areas in the world that resonate with them, they undoubtedly are better positioned to navigate their career pathway journey. So I just want to double click on that point, which is we think it is essential to support young people to intentionally consider their sense of purpose, intentionally consider their multifaceted identity, and equally intentionally allow them to explore all the different career pathways and opportunities that are out there. Because once young people, just like us, have a clear sense of their own identity and their sense of purpose, they're able to make much more informed choices about the career pathways that they want to take. And we've intentionally used the word career exploration because Izzy's story resonated with me, which is she's considered a bunch of different pathways. It's not always clear. And I think giving young people those options are really important. And in our curriculum, we've created very explicit learning experiences, leveraging LinkedIn as a social capital and career exploration platform to provide a scalable solution, because there are logistical, operational complexities in creating sort of in-person internship and opportunities like that. So we've tried to figure out ways that we can scale that concept across a number of schools through our curriculum. The last point I want to make is we've been working with schools, educators, youth organizations across the country. And what we found is that this type of content can have meaningful, positive impact on a school culture, especially when we as educators participate alongside our students. In fact, the 2 learning experiences that I've shared with you, we've had multiple educators from a range of regions and places across the country participate in those 2 learning experiences with great resonance and measurable positive impact. And what we've also found that the dosage of this type of content doesn't need to be too onerous for it to have positive impact. In fact, at one school in Chicago, after just 5 days of NXU content, the teacher said to a student, I've known you for 3 years, but I've gotten to know you more comprehensively and holistically in 5 days than I did in 3 years of teaching you. And then a few minutes later, I overheard the teacher say to a colleague, I feel rejuvenated as a teacher because I got a chance to connect so differently and sort of holistically with my students, and because I got reconnected to my own essential sense of purpose. So the last that I'll leave you with as we navigate the rest of our time together is I welcome all of you with the energy of Izzy, the energy of Andrew, and hopefully my energy, and hopefully Andrew and Mahnaz's energy, to envision a world in which all of us and our students have a deeper, more multifaceted, comprehensive understanding of our own identity, a crystal clear, compelling sense of individualized and collective sense of purpose, and a supportive community to navigate the inevitable decisions, questions, and uncertainties that lie ahead. So thanks again, and looking forward to the rest of our time together. I look forward to hearing from Nathaniel and his perspectives on all these topics as well.
Yutaka, can you remind us what grades and what schools does NXU support right now?
Yes, thank you. Because I wrote down a note about Brian's question. So we've been focused on high school. We have a 111 lesson curriculum for high schools. We've also created a higher ed 3 credit bearing version of our curriculum that does a deeper dive into career exploration in partnership with a nascent higher ed institution called Opportunity College. And we've created a V1 version of a middle school curriculum such that by the spring, we plan to have a 7-year scope and sequence, 6th through 12th grade curriculum that we hope to share with an increasingly large number of schools, educators, and youth organizations. So Brian, if you're interested in learning more, feel free to contact me.
Thank you. So just a reflection, at the institute I work at, Clayton Christian Institute, we've been thinking a lot and doing some research understanding this term that Yutaka mentioned, social capital. And what brings to mind based on what we've heard so far, both from Izzy, Andrew, and Yutaka, is this idea of connectedness and the power of relationships to help shape identity, but then the relationships that emerge from that exploration are equally as important when we think about young people like Izzy's ability not just to access these relationships, to think about what's possible, but then to have the agency and the skill set to go back to the mayor when your internship is done, to go back to your advisors in high school and re-engage as your interests evolve and your passions evolve. And so I just wanted to point out that to me feels like a very valuable opportunity that does exist through these programs. And I think there's huge potential in our schools and systems to more thoughtfully cultivate that. Any questions from the panelists or reflections?
Just to build off of what you said, and I use the term latent social capital, but we think that there's latent social capital within classroom communities and school communities. In fact, in one classroom that I delivered just 5 sessions, 2 supposed BFFs who seemed to spend all day long together went through one of our lessons and said, I had no idea that's what you want to go do with your life. As a result, they've developed sort of, and both of them had similar and complementary career interests. Now they've gotten connected around that. And there were 2 other students we worked with who were both working on a similar sort of idea, didn't realize that until they went through a learning experience that we provided. And now they're working together to make a combined initiative that never would have happened. And again, we just think that if students are given the opportunity to connect meaningfully with each other about these types of topics, you start to uncover resources and opportunities right in your home classroom, your home school. So I just wanted to mention that as something that we find pretty critical.
Yes, thank you. And I'll post a link to a website where our team has tried to really synthesize some of the great work, including from the panelists here on whoyouknow.org. But in our mind, we define social capital as young people's access to and ability to mobilize relationships as their needs and interests evolve. And as Yutaka said, like those relationships are not just the adults in the classroom or the school building, it's your peers, it's the graduates, it's the community, the family, the business partners. All of these relationships carry a powerful role in informing, shaping, and supporting young people and the goals as they evolve. So with that, I would love to, again, reintroduce Nathaniel Cole. Nathaniel, I bet you have a ton of reflections, one from your experience working with youth for so long and now working in the workforce space, and how you see some of these experiences Izzy's been talking about manifest in the work you do with adults. So would like to kind of hand off to you to share these reflections and ideas as they're probably percolating in your head.
Thank you so much. So we have a little over 80 folks as of now on the conversation. And before I get started, I just want to challenge folks to take about 30 seconds based on where you are at this point in your journey, whether it's your career, your education, or just navigating life. What's your why? And just thinking about the driver behind what you do and how you show up each and every day. And I like to start there because personally, that has been something that has impacted the work that I've done thus far in my career. As it's been alluded to, I have navigated a lot of spaces, everything from the internship space and working to connect high school students to experiences at major corporations, everything from the World Bank to NASA to their local nonprofits, then transitioning to look at youth employment and workforce development on a national scale and the importance of young people being ready for work, connected to opportunities, and then supported when they're in those experiences. And now in this world of upskilling and reskilling for frontline talent. And so when you talk about workforce development, relationships, purpose, all of that, y'all are my people right now. And so the conversation thus far has warmed my heart. And I also believe that it's important when we think about connection to also think about and reconnect with our why. And I opened up with that because listening to everyone and really going back to Izzy's comments and how she really kicked off the session, she talked about the ability of feeling seen, right? I took notes, Izzy, like I took notes. You took me to school. Of feeling seen, right? Supported. I also heard elements of trust there, but the thing that I put a star beside because I thought it was golden for our conversation is her advisor took note of what her interest was and how her internship was transformative, and that piece of the individual taking note of Izzy. And I think sometimes in the work, and I'll start personal, and if it hits home with you, so be it. But when I first started off in this work, it was about me. How am I helping young people do better? How am I fill in the blank when it comes to this type of work? And there were moments along the way where I wasn't fully listening to the young people that I was supposedly serving, right? And it wasn't until they came back, I had one young man in particular come back and share that while our organization helped them get to college, right? Because that was an outcome, right? We wanted to make sure they were getting somewhere. And Andrew, I loved your comment around what outcomes really are. And it's where folks are later on in life. And so he came back, he was like, yeah, Mr. Nate, I did the college thing, but I'm now in the Air Force, right? And so that was always his dream, but we wanted to put him on a different path, a path that felt like it was the right thing to do, the path that would really set him up for long-term success. And we were wrong. And what I learned in that experience was, wow, I have to not make this exchange about me and how am I listening to the other and how am I also re-examining my why. And I call that out because sometimes for us doing this work, it can feel good. It can feel like, we're carrying the banner for communities and we're really moving things forward. But if our hearts aren't right, and if we aren't listening to those who we're serving, there's some work that we have to do internally. And I just put that out there, my own little therapy moment. But another piece that I wanted to touch on, and just the beauty of this conversation, is the power of the pivot. And with internships, and the panelists have touched on this beautifully, I think we are all trying to figure out some stuff in life. And with the future of work being this big question where no one really knows, especially after the past 2 years that we've had, what the workspace and what quality of life when it comes to work will be, and all of the question marks, it is a disservice to try to pivot and box in, not pivot, but box in young talent to one pathway. But how do we support talent in navigating that pivot? Where are those transferable skills? How are we being open to the navigating of just life? One moment I want to be a fashion designer, but then the next moment, this political thing is kind of interesting. And you know what? I can bring my fashion into politics. And I didn't know that. And I wanted to just bring this up because sometimes when we talk about internships and exposure and connectedness, right, and relationship building, I believe that we, all, the royal we, are able to dream bigger and have a better idea of what's possible when we're exposed to more. And so the beauty of exposure allows for us to dream bigger dreams and make those pivots, right? And so in one season of life, talent might think that they're only able to explore these 3 pathways, but it's not until exposure and a caring adult listening to what some of those interests are to bring in some other possibilities for talent to explore, where they're like, oh my God, I didn't even know this was out here. Like, okay, I want to explore this now. And there's a beauty in that. And what they were able to accomplish and acquire in that previous season isn't lost, right? What are those transferable skills that we're able to name for talent and partner with talent in as they navigate their journey? And then 2 last pieces, and then I'll wrap it up, is this piece around social capital. And I love social capital. I love the spirit of it. And I also believe sometimes when it's thrown out, we also have to do a few clicks below. And, you know, Yutaka touched on the social emotional learning. And then what I really loved was, and I wrote this down, was partner alongside students. In that partnering and also recognizing the complexities of one's journey and how to be present for talent. When it comes to social capital, how are we not only inviting folks into our circles, but partnering with them as they're entering new circles? Social capital can be scary for the person that's cashing in and the person that's receiving. For the person that's cashing in, that means you're letting someone in, you're bringing someone in to something that you hold near and dear, more than likely when it comes to your career. Or your circles. When it comes to the individual that's receiving, they may be entering a new space that's different, that's uncomfortable, dare I say scary, and as a grown man, get butterflies in your tummy, right? And so when those realities are ever present, how are we in that walking alongside, having the real conversations of, yeah, you might be the only person that looks like you when you go into this space, but how are you feeling about that? I think you can navigate it. Like I've seen others navigate it, right? Or, you know what? Folks in this space have a level of experience that looks a lot different from yours, but that doesn't matter because you stand out in X, Y, and Z area. So it's like when we are stepping into the social capital, whether we are cashing in or we are like receiving, how are we having a conversation before the exchange fully takes place? Because I think that's where, when we talk about connectedness, we go back to the trust. When there's a level of trust there and understanding and both feel seen and heard, we're able to have these conversations that allow for a really fruitful experience and journey, and goes back to the picture that Andrew showed at the top of the presentation, where 15 years later, the relationships are still there because the work has been done. But folks, sometimes the work is scary, it's hard, and it's time consuming. But when we do that, and when we're able to connect back to our why, and when we re-examine our why season after season, it allows us to be able to do this work and to be awesome partners as talent is evolving and navigating, quite honestly, life. And then the last piece is work does not equal purpose, but when we understand our purpose, it allows us to be better informed about how we work. And I'm just speaking from experience. There was a moment in my life where I was like, you know, where I work is who I am. And I had to learn the hard way. That's not true. And so I came to find out others feel the same way or have navigated similar waters. And so I just want to underscore that when we understand that in the development and exploring and unpacking of what purpose is, how do we take work out of it? How do we take career path out of it? Who are you outside of a 9-to-5? Who are you if having a salary and a check was not a question, but you just had to live life? And how does that then inform the way in which you show up into these other spaces and places to truly be successful? So I'll leave it there because this panel has been awesome. Once again, a page full of notes from you all through and through. So I appreciate being a part of the conversation, and I'll turn it back to our amazing facilitator.
Thank you so much for grounding us in that powerful perspective. Can I just highlight, so Nathaniel, one thing you mentioned that I think is extremely important as we talk about the power of relationships is trust, right? Not all relationships are created equally. And we know from research that a negative relationship is actually worse than no relationship at all. And so there is a huge responsibility on our shoulders to make sure that we are responding in ways that Izzy and her peers want and need, and not in a way that makes us feel good about ourselves. or based on what we know. I mean, gosh, I feel like you just schooled me as a parent. So thank you for that. I kind of needed that this week. So in closing, and thank you folks for seeing that. Thanks, Julia, for an example model here from Mentor, actually. And so we'll continue to share resources, but I'd like to invite each of the panelists, if you're willing to, we can just maybe go in a circle and in order and just share a takeaway or a message to the attendees that that's resonating with you, or that you'd like the group to walk away with. Or it could be a model or an example that you're aware of that you think could be helpful for others to go learn more about. Let's see. We show it just Izzy, Andrew, Yutaka, and Nathaniel in that order.
I don't know. There's so many.
You've taught us all far more, so you're welcome to pass or take a shot. I will leave that up to you.
No, I shall not pass. I think really my takeaway is listen to your youth. Even if what they're saying, it sounds ridiculous, I promise you, there's a smidge of something that makes sense in there. Just have to dig a little bit. So listen to your youth, and then listen to your heart, body, and soul as well. I feel like for a lot of adults and teachers, it's, oh, we have to listen to our youth, listen to our youth, listen to our youth. But it's really, really hard to actually listen to something and progress in something if you're not taking care of yourself and listening to your own heart as well. And that's how my advisor got me where I am. It's because he listened to taking care of himself as well, and making sure that he can be his best self, so we can be our best selves. So yeah, that'd be my takeaway. Listen to your youth and listen to yourself as well.
I feel like that's a mic drop right there. I don't know how to follow that. I'll just say, so first I'll take your advice, Izzy. I'll listen to you as listen to your youth. I'll also just say, I really appreciated hearing two things. I'm just thinking a bit about Yutaka introducing these ideas of these purpose statements. It's got me really thinking about how those evolve over time. So I just think they'd be so amazing to see, like, second graders and fifth graders and eighth graders and 11th graders and 20-year-olds, right? Like, how it would be such an amazing way to sort of think about how the way we think about our purpose evolves over time. That's just one I'm mulling on. Yeah, and I appreciate, Nathaniel, you bringing us, that question of why. I think that, so often we talk about, schools focusing too much on the what, and they need to focus on the who. I think that why piece has got to be threaded through there as well. And we gotta ask our youth the right questions, and then listen to them. So just thrilled to be a part of this conversation and excited. I think a last parting thing I would say is, because I heard some folks asking, like, well, how do I get started with this? And I would say, like, don't wait for the conditions to be perfect. Like, they will never be perfect. Like, you make things more perfect by starting. So if you're ready to go do some big, massive shift, great, like, launch into that. But if you're only ready to take one little incremental step, like, start that now. Start with something like a purpose statement. Start with, like, talking to students about why. Jump into having kids go out on some informational interviews or shadow days. Like, start with the steps you can and then build. But excited. Thank you.
I would say a few things, just again, channeling, like I'm looking at Lizzie, your rectangle on my screen. Just again, back to like, if you think about Izzy's journey, it's so multifaceted. So again, figuring out a way to connect the dots among purpose, SEL, identity, relationship and social capital development, career exploration. I think that is something that we've become increasingly focused on, that I just want to re-emphasize. Two, I think it's critical for all of us as educators to do the work ourselves and to cultivate our own sense of identity, our own sense of purpose, our own why, because our capacity to grow those dimensions within ourselves is correlated with our capacity to go develop those dimensions within our young people. So I wanted to note that. And last but not least, I do come back to what Andrew just said, which is, we have found schools start to generate momentum when they start somewhere, even if it's a very small step. One lesson, one workshop, one something. As you start to do that, you start to generate awareness, interest among your students and educators. So even though some of this may seem aspirational and big, if you start with one concrete step, it increases the likelihood that you'll start to generate momentum. So I just wanted to share that one last thought.
I would add to folks being here under the banner of social capital. How do you challenge yourself to bring a young person or young talent that is outside of your spheres of influence or the spaces that you navigate in? How do you invite them in? And how do you challenge folks within your circles to also invite young talent in and to take a chance? I think for most of us, someone along the way has taken a chance on us. So how are we passing that on and moving things forward in that direction? So under the banner of social capital, how do you re-examine who you bring in and how you are pushing and challenging and nudging folks within the circles that you find yourselves? That's it.
Amazing. Thank you all. And I'll conclude with saying, in the spirit of doing this alongside youth, making this learning visible is extremely important. I saw, Andrew, you just shared about Emblaze, which we didn't have time to do justice to, but whether it is in the form of a dashboard that a young person can then go in and look for opportunities or even visibly see the relationships they're building, or some kind of mapping activity that we see with NXQ, the idea that they are seeing there's a value in this, like we assess for math and reading fluency, they see this is a skill and a mindset that's worth cultivating and building and having ownership over. Feels very powerful. So thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you to the panelists, Izzy, Andrew, Nathaniel, Yutaka. This is so powerful. I always learn far more than I give, and I'm super grateful for your time and commitment to learning and growing together. And thank you for those of you who attended. Please feel free to reach out to us. You can find all of us on LinkedIn for sure if our information is not already available, and happy to chat and continue to grow together. Thank you.